Children under attack after court victor public outrage. Followed. Donations. Petitions. Churches organizing. Women's groups mobilizing. For the first time, the powerful men who had operated quietly found themselves exposed. In private, Crow met with Jonah. "You've changed this," he said. "No," Jonah replied. "They did." Crow nodded. "I spent my career believing systems were stronger than people. And now?" Crow looked out the window. "Now I think people are stronger than systems. But systems fight harder." The night before the second hearing, Jonah could not sleep. He sat on the porch. Eliza joined him. "You're afraid," she said. "Yes. So am I." They sat in silence. After a while, she spoke again. "If we lose, what happens?" Jonah answered honestly. "They take you." She absorbed that. Then she said something that would stay with him forever. "Then we make losing impossible." Far away, in rooms filled with smoke and whispered deals, men drafted strategies. Discredit the rancher. Break the witnesses. Delay. Reform. Protect profit. They did not realize they were already too late, because the fight had grown beyond them. It had become a movement, and movements, once born, do not die quietly. By the time the second hearing opened, it was no longer a territorial matter. It was a spectacle. Telegraph lines had carried the story across state borders. Reporters arrived from Cheyenne, Denver, even as far as Chicago. Women's advocacy groups filled entire rows of the courthouse. Ranchers who had once mocked Jonah now stood guard at the doors, and outside hundreds, farmers, mothers, veterans, former orphans. Some carried signs, some carried rifles. No one carried silence anymore. Inside, the opposition had changed strategy. They no longer argued law. They attacked character. The lead attorney for the petitioners, Martin Halbrook, stood tall and polished. "Your Honor, this is no longer about 3 girls. This is about a man using minors as political leverage." A sharp intake of breath in the room. Halbrook continued smoothly. "Mr. Mercer has invited public unrest. His property has been the site of violence. These children are at risk because he refuses to step back from agitation." Jonah did not react, but Clara did. Her hands curled into fists. Eliza touched her wrist gently. "Wait," she whispered. Then came the strike they had prepared carefully. Halbrook called a witness. The uncle, the man who had put them on the platform. He walked forward stiffly. Avoiding their eyes. "Did Mr. Mercer outbid others?" Halbrook asked. "Yes." "Did he escalate the bidding?" "Yes." "Did you intend for the girls to go to a farming family prepared for domestic integration?" "Yes." The lie hung thick. Eliza stood halfway up. Jonah placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Not yet." Then Halbrook delivered the blade. "Is it not true that since the hearing, Mr. Mercer has encouraged these minors to publicly criticize territorial governance?" The implication was clear. Manipulation. Exploitation. Weaponization. Inspector Crow sat rigid. He had known they would fight. He had not known they would twist the girls into pawns again. His name was called. Next. He stood. Sworn in. Halbrook circled carefully. "Inspector Crow, is it accurate that violence has occurred at Mercer Ranch?" "Yes." "Would you describe it as stable?" A pause. "No." "Would you describe the miners as safe?" Crow looked at Eliza. At Clara. At May. He thought of the platform. He thought of the fire. He thought of the dead calf, and he understood something fully for the first time. Instability had not been created by reform. It had been revealed by it. "They are targeted," he said clearly. "By whom?" Halbrook pressed. "By those who benefited from silence." The courtroom shifted. Halbrook stiffened. "That is speculation." "No," Crow replied. "It is observation." "And would you recommend revoking guardianship for the safety of these minors?" Crow inhaled. The old version of himself would have said yes. The system first. Version. The order before justice version. Instead, he said, "I would recommend prosecuting those who set the fire." The room erupted. Judge Bell hammered the gavel. Order. Took nearly a full minute to return. Crow did not sit down until he had finished. "And I would recommend immediate reform of guardianship statutes. Because what occurred in Red Hollow was legal. And legality does not equal morality." It was the moment the system cracked. Publicly. Irreversibly. Outside the courthouse. The crowd heard the cheering through the walls. Word spread instantly. Crow had switched sides. The headlines were, already righting themselves. But power does not surrender without one final strike. That evening, as Jonah and the girls returned to their temporary lodging in town, the attack came. Wagon cut across the street. Two men jumped down, fast, brutal, one. Grabbed May. Clara screamed. Jonah lunged. The second man swung a rifle butt into his ribs. Crow, riding behind them, drew his revolver. Drop her. The street froze. One man ran, the other hesitated, and that hesitation saved May. Crow fired into the dirt at his feet. The man released her. Deputies tackled him. Seconds later, May sobbed into Jonah's coat. Clara trembled violently. Eliza stood very still. Watching. Memorizing. The arrested man talked. Under pressure. Under fear. He named names. Businessmen. Ranch investors. Two members of the Territorial Oversight Committee. The same men who signed the petition. By morning, warrants were issued. By noon, arrests began. The scandal detonated. Newspapers printed in bold. Attempted kidnapping linked to anti-reform coalitio, and the public did not divide this time. It unified. The second hearing resumed under armed guard. Bell's voice carried a new weight. This court finds no grounds for revocation of guardianship. Furthermore, this court refers evidence of criminal conspiracy to territorial prosecutors. The gavel struck. Final. But something larger followed. He added, this court also formally requests immediate legislative session to amend child guardianship statutes. Effective reform cannot wait. Applause broke the chamber. Unprecedented. Uncontainable. Night. In a crowded hall lit by lanterns, Jonah stood before townspeople. He was not a speaker. He was not polished, but he was honest. I did not plan this, he said. I did not seek a movement. I saw three children standing where children should never stand. Silence. If protecting them requires changing the law, then we change the law. A woman in the front row stood. Then another, then dozens. Within weeks, committees formed. Petitions gathered thousands of signatures. Women organized oversight boards. Churches demanded transparency. And Inspector Crow resigned. Publicly. His letter was printed in full. I once believed order alone preserves society. I now believe justice must define it. Far beyond Red Hollow, legislators in neighboring territories began drafting similar reforms. What began as $75 had become a legislative wildfire. And for the first time, the men who had profited from quiet transfers understood something terrifying. They were losing. That night, back at the ranch, May asked a small question. Are we safe now? Jonah looked at the barn rebuilt by neighbors. At Clara, asleep by the fire. At Eliza, writing letters by lamplight. He answered carefully, we're safer. Eliza looked up, but we're not done. Jonah nodded. No, he said. We're just beginning. The Territorial Assembly had never seen a crowd like this. By the time Jonah and the girls arrived in Red Hollow's capital, the streets were already overflowing. Wagons lined every road. People had traveled for days. Mothers with children, veterans in worn uniforms, ranchers in dust-covered boots, teachers, church leaders, women's suffrage groups, who saw in this fight a mirror of their own, and reporters. Dozens. Some from as far as Chicago and New York City. The reform bill had been named the Child Protection and Placement Act, but the newspapers called it something else. The Mercer bill. Jonah hated that. Eliza understood why. Movements needed faces. Inside the chamber, tension was thick enough to choke on. Opposition had not vanished. It had hardened. The old guard now argued that reform would destroy family authority, bankrupt the territory, and create government overreach. But the scandal from the kidnapping attempt had shattered their credibility, and public anger had replaced fear. Inspector Crow, no longer an inspector, stood with them. His hair seemed grayer, his shoulders lighter. I never thought I'd stand here, he said quietly. Jonah glanced at him. Neither did I. The debate lasted 4 days. 4 days of speeches, 4 days of testimony, 4 days of strategy, negotiation and compromise. Some wanted harsher punishments. Some wanted slower change. Some wanted the bill weakened. But the movement outside the building grew louder every hour. Candles at night. Songs. Prayers. And determination. On the 5th day, the assembly requested a final witness. Eliza. She stood alone at the front, 16 now, still thin, still fierce, but no longer afraid. She did not bring notes. She Did not need them. My name is Eliza Mercer, she began. I was sold at auction last year. The room still. She told the story again, but this time it was different. This time she did not speak as a victim, she spoke as a leader. I am not here because I am special, she said. I am here because someone chose not to look away. She pointed toward the gallery. Many of you saw us as property. Numbers, problems. She paused. But when the fire came, our neighbors came too. Her voice softened. You changed before the law did. Silence. If the people can change, so can the law. Then she did something no one expected. She turned toward the opposition benches. You say this bill will destroy families, she said. But I was not in a family. She gestured toward Jonah. Now I am. And if the law had protected me, sooner I would not carry scars that never leave. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. This is not about control. It is about dignity. If you vote no, you are saying children are still property. The wind that morning carried dust like ash. It clung to eyelashes. It coated tongues. It turned the wooden auction platform into something that looked less like a stage and more like a scaffold. No one in Red Hollow, Wyoming territory had ever seen children sold before. Not openly. But debt had a way of stripping shame from men. The sisters stood barefoot. Eliza, 16, chin lifted in defiance that felt rehearsed. Clara, 13, clutching a torn shawl. And tiny May, only 7, gripping Clara's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone bone white. Behind them, a hand-painted sign, Guardianship Transfer Legal and Bind. Their uncle stood beside the auctioneer. He would not meet their eyes. Starting. Bid, the auctioneer barked, adjusting his vest. $50 for all 3, healthy, strong, trainable. Trainable. The word passed through the crowd, like smoke. Eliza felt something inside her close. This was how it ended. Not with illness, not with wolves, not with hunger, but with paperwork. 50, someone called lazily. 55. A wrench. Foreman squinted at Clara's arms. She looked sturdy. Eliza stepped forward instinctively, placing herself between Clara and the bidders. Don't, she whispered without turning. Don't look afraid. From the edge of the crowd, a man watched in silence. Jonah Mercer had buried his wife 18 months ago. He had not spoken her name aloud since. He had come to town to sell cattle. He had not come to buy children. But when the auctioneer grabbed May's wrist and lifted her arm like livestock, something inside him broke. 75. The voice cut through the dust like thunder. Heads turned. Jonah stepped forward slowly, hat low, eyes hard for all 3. He said. The auctioneer blinked. 75 once. No, Jonah interrupted. He stepped closer to the platform. 75 final. There was something in his voice that suggested this was not a negotiation. The gavel came down. Sold. And just like that, 3 girls became his responsibility. When Jonah helped them off the platform, he did not touch them without asking, Can I? He said quietly to Eliza. She hesitated, then nodded. The town watched. Some approving, some amused, some calculating. One man did not approve. Territory Child Inspector Daniel Crow stood near the back, jaw tight. This isn't over, he muttered. Wagon ride to Mercer Ranch was silent. Clara finally whispered, Are we servants? Jonah stared straight ahead. No. Then what are we? He thought about the empty house, the untouched piano, the rooms that still smelled like lavender. You're not property, he said roughly. That's all I know, right? Now, that night, the girls ate stew at a long wooden table that had not hosted laughter in nearly 2 years. May fell asleep mid-bite. Clara cried quietly into her sleeve. Eliza stayed upright. Watching. Measuring. Jonah finally spoke. I don't know how to raise girls. Silence. But I know how to raise cattle. Eliza's eyes flashed. He met them evenly. And cattle thrive when you give them space, structure, and protection. He leaned back. You'll have all 3. That was the first promise. Outside, Inspector Crow mounted his horse. He intended to review the paperwork. He intended to find violation. He intended to prove that Jonah Mercer had no right to defy established guardianship. Commerce. He believed in order. He believed in systems. He believed the law was neutral. He did not yet understand that laws could be cruel. That night, Eliza lay awake staring at the ceiling beams. She did not know that in 25 years, she would stand before lawmakers in Washington. She did not know that the wooden auction platform would one day be replaced by a memorial. She only knew this. A stranger had chosen anger over indifference. And that choice had changed everything. The first sign of trouble came. 3 days later. Dust rose on the horizon just after sunrise. Jonah saw it from the pasture while checking fence lines. A single rider, straight posture, government saddle. No hesitation in the horse's pace. He knew before the man reached the gate. Law. The girls were inside the house. May was helping Clara knead dough, though most of the flour had ended up on her face. Eliza stood at the window, watching the rider grow larger. "Who is that?" Clara whispered. Eliza did not answer. She had learned something already about this new life. Peace never arrived without being tested. Inspector Daniel Crow dismounted. Without greeting. His boots struck the ground with sharp authority. He did not remove his hat. "Mr. Mercer?" Jonah leaned against the fence. "Inspector." Crow's eyes moved past him toward the house. "I'm here regarding the guardianship. Transfer conducted in Red Hollow. It was legal. We'll determine that." Jonah did not move, neither did Crow. Wind passed between them. Finally, Crow stepped forward. "I need to speak with the girls." "No." The word came instantly. Crow's jaw tightened. "That isn't a request. It is now." For a long moment, they measured each other. Crow had seen men like this before. Ranchers who believed distance placed them above authority. Men who resisted regulation. But something about Mercer was different. He did not look angry. He looked anchored. Crow changed tactics. "Mr. Mercer, the territory has an obligation to ensure minors are not exploited under the guise of guardianship. I will not allow emotional impulse to override structured oversight." Jonah replied quietly, "And I will not allow strangers to frighten children who have had enough fear for a lifetime." The silence thickened. Finally, Crow stepped past him. Jonah did not stop him, but he followed. The girls froze when the inspector entered. May hid behind Clara. Crow's voice softened slightly. "What are your names?" "Eliza," she said before the others could speak. He nodded. "Do you understand your situation?" Eliza held his gaze. "We are not property," Crow blinked. "And how do you know that?" "Because he told us." She did not look at Jonah. She did not need to. Crow studied her. Smart, defiant, dangerous. "Has Mr. Mercer harmed you?" "No." "Threatened you?" "No." "Placed you in labor beyond reasonable expectation?" Eliza paused. "We work," she said, "but we eat. We sleep. We are warm. And we are free to speak." Crow wrote something in his notebook. May peeked around Clara. "Are you going to take us away?" May began to cry. Clara held her. Something uncomfortable stirred in the inspector's chest. He had expected fear of Mercer. Not fear of the law. That afternoon, Crow walked the property. He checked the barn, the sleeping quarters, the kitchen. Everything was orderly. Not luxurious, but dignified. When he returned to the yard, Jonah was repairing a broken gate. "You're thorough," Jonah said. "I'm obligated." "You always believe the system works?" Crow's reply came automatically. "It prevents chaos." Jonah drove a nail into wood. Sometimes chaos is just the sound of broken systems. Crow said nothing, but the words followed him. The next week, rumors spread. The Red Hollow Gazette printed an article. "Cattleman acquires 3 minors in questionable sale." Town divided quickly. Some called Jonah a hero. Others called him dangerous. Businessmen feared regulation. Clergy praised protection. The girls felt the change immediately. At the market, women stared. Men whispered. May stopped smiling in public. Clara began walking with her head down. Eliza grew sharper. One afternoon, she confronted Jonah. "Why do they hate us?" "They don't," he said. "They fear change." "Then why don't we leave?" Jonah looked at the horizon. "Because if we run, nothing changes." That night, a rock struck the barn. Then another. Jonah stepped outside with a lantern. 3 boys stood beyond the fence. "Go home," he said. One spat. "You think you're better than us? Buying girls like cattle?" Jonah walked closer. "I bought responsibility." The boys hesitated. "You think the law won't come for you?" "It already has." They left, But the message remained. The conflict was no longer private. It was public. Inspector Crow returned 2 days later. This time his face was different. There will be a hearing, he said. Territory review. Eliza stepped forward. Will they separate us? Crow hesitated. Possibly. May began crying again. Jonah looked at Crow. You're doing this? Crow met his eyes. Yes. Even after what you saw? Yes. Why? Crow answered with brutal honesty. Because if I do not, the entire guardianship system collapses. Jonah nodded slowly. Good, Crow frowned. Good? Yes, it should. For the first time, doubt flickered in the inspector's expression. That night, Eliza could not sleep. She walked outside and found Crow near the gate. You don't believe in what you're doing anymore, she said. He looked at her. I believe in structure. You believe in control. And you believe in chaos. I believe in dignity. The wind carried silence between them. Finally, Crow asked, What do you want? Eliza answered without hesitation. A world where no child stands on a platform while men bargain. Crow looked away. For the first time in years, he wondered if law and justice were not the same thing. Far away. In the territory capital, the date of the hearing was set, and without anyone realizing it, the first step toward a national movement had begun. The courthouse and territory hall had never been full for a guardianship review. Land disputes filled seats. Murder trials packed balconies. But children? Children were paperwork. Until now. By sunrise, wagons lined the road. Ranchers in dust-stained coats stood beside merchants in pressed vests. Women from the church arrived in clusters, whispering prayers. Reporters sharpened pencils like knives. On the courthouse steps, someone had mailed a crude sign.